Greetings, warrior. It's good to see you in one piece. I'm Dave Makes Noises, and today we're asking the internet, what was your favorite D&D encounter, and what did your character do in it? Part 1. To preface this was not strictly with any of the editions of D&D, but rather in a homebrew system that a D&D and Air Force veteran was developing and needed people to playtest for him. I wasn't a fan of many of his arbitrary rules, but his stories, while unfair, were incredibly dramatic. And when you were having fun, you were having fun. With that aside, I was playing a half-dragon space engineer. Accompanying me was a half-dragon pilot who fancied herself a cowgirl, complete with an authentic hat and boots and liked to shoot 2 energy pistols at once. Another was a slightly empathic techno-mage who was our communications officer, which was a challenge for the player as he was very soft-spoken and shy. Another was a cat or fox? Folk woman who was a market trader with some black market connections. We had a few more, but the 4 of us were the people who showed up the most often to games, so the others are less memorable. We have been causing a bit of trouble, as adventuring groups often tend to do, and prior to this we had fended off a pirate ambush who used a half-damaged hauler as bait to lure in responders, and one of our crew members was a half-dragon princess apparently, so our crew was on some powerful folks' radar. So, on our way to deliver some special equipment to some mining station, we stopped by another station to get some rest, move around, and socialize with people other than just ourselves. Along the way, our empath has some premonition about some trouble. They were coming for us, but we wouldn't know when or where. Well, being a slightly eccentric space engineer, my response to this is to bring my toolbox. "You're bringing your toolbox?" asks the GM incredulously.
"Yep, what with that vision, plus why not?"
So I walk around with a duffel bag-like toolbox over my shoulder. Few of us head on to the bar and order some drinks when suddenly, someone decides to flash while the door to the bar shut with everyone still inside. After curses are muttered, I quickly rummage through my pack to retrieve my trusty laser cutter. It won't be quick, but no one locks me in a bar. At this time, I had also purchased a Doctor Who, 11th, I think. Ooh, I have the same one! Sonic screwdriver to use as my prop for the games. Popping that thing out and hearing it squeal was fantastic. Hold on, I'm gonna go get mine, and I'm gonna sample it just for you, because I love you that much. Great, now that that's been dealt with, back to it. So it's me and the cowgirl, and I am cutting my way through the door. Now, energy weapons are fairly commonplace, but that doesn't mean they are not pricey or technical to use. So I had taken a liking to using a modern shotgun as my weapon of choice. Sneaking it into my bag might have gotten me in trouble with the locals, but they weren't willing to complain. At least not at that time. The bad guys' weapons, though, were definitely high-tech blasters. Well, the cowgirl had the ability to EMP a small area. It was more an annoyance at most times, especially when you can accidentally EMP the air regulators and suffocate everyone. But in this case, she was able to use it to disable their weapons. I kick down the door, they point their guns at me, and go click, and I blast them away. No longer stuck in the bar, the cowgirl and I head on up to the hangar to check on our friends, only to find them under attack by more of the bad guys. On their own, there is no way they could prevail, which was kind of meant to be the point. Remember when I said his games were often unfair? But with myself and the cowgirl, the 2 characters with the highest combat scores coming up from the rear of the merc group, things turned around quickly. The first thing that happened was I took out one of the mercs while he was unaware, but the second one lit up my left side pretty good and disabled my arm. To this I respond by shooting that guy with my one good hand with a 2-handed shotgun, which promptly flew out of my hand because duh, but I took out the guard with that last shot. By this time I was so badly injured and with one arm disabled and bleeding, I was out of the fight. But with their rear compromised and the cowgirl running in guns blazing, the bad guys had to call a retreat. We saved our friends from a kidnapping, or worse, and give the bad guys a black eye that they wouldn't soon forget. Though this was years ago, I still remember his name. Raz, the half-dragon space engineer. After all was said and done, we learned that the reason my character and the cowgirl were trapped in the bar was mostly so that my character would have the chance to interact with a spy whom we helped escape several weeks prior. I was actively trying to help him out. He was spying for the Empire, and I, being a proud Empire citizen, wanted to help any way I could. And he was disguised as the barman. The alternative, though, was far more memorable of a game. Years ago, I was at a convention that had a gaming room where D&D dominated. Not unusual then. I noticed that one table had players leaving it grumbling. At the table were 2 attractive young ladies and Guy, who was obviously the DM. At the time, I was involved in another game and couldn't really investigate what was going on, but this dynamic played out several times. Players would sit down and game for an hour or so, then get up. Some of these players were pissed off. Others seemed simply surprised and a little impressed by something. What? The next night, there they were, the two young ladies and the DM. Two guys had sat down and they were looking for one more player. I had joined them. The DM said I'd need a character around 15th level and asked if I had one with me. I told him I had several characters with me that were around that level. He told me to pick one. I selected the Damu, a 15th level grandfather of assassins. This dude was loaded. The DM then set up our situation. We were in a rough and rowdy tavern. We three guys had answered a notice posted in the public square asking for experienced adventurers and promising rich rewards. The two ladies had posted the notice. One of them asked me to tell them about myself. I said that you see a human about 6 feet tall, dressed in black with silver filigree. I was wearing a cape that hid any weapons I might have. She asked me what class I was. I told her to guess. She smiled and moved on. When she asked the next guy, he went into considerably more detail. He told her about his class, his fighter, and the weapons, armor, and some of the magic items he had. Again, she smiled and went to the next guy who also bragged about his character, a magic user / thief, and all the stuff he had. The two ladies immediately attacked the fighter and basically beat the shit out of him, rendering him below 0 hit points and unconscious. They then attacked the magic user / thief, who'd been so surprised that he'd done nothing but stand and watch. They beat the shit out of him too. Then they stripped the supine bodies of everything worth having. Though they didn't kill either of the characters, the players weren't happy. The two ladies then looked at me. One of them asked me if I wanted to fight or just give them my stuff. In the scenario, I'd been sitting at the bar with my back to the rather startling events. I continued to keep my back to them and said over my shoulder that I wasn't going to give them anything and that if they attacked me, I'd kill them both. I then stood up, faced them, took a step forward, and whispered, "You don't scare me one damned bit." They both laughed, and one of them said, "You're in." To be honest, these two ladies scared the crap out of me. I couldn't believe what they'd just done. I bluffed and it worked. The three of us then went on to run through the game the DM had devised. It was challenging and fun. For a couple of years afterwards, I gamed with these three occasionally. It was always interesting because they were so cutthroat. New players always had to go through their odd little initiation. If they made the grade, they were in. If not, goodbye. Yeah, always interesting. This was in the days of 1st and 2nd edition. The DM, James, mixed the two editions into a sort of hybrid. Well, I'm the DM, so I don't have a character, but I'll tell you about one recent encounter that was a lot of fun, from my side anyway. The player characters were storming a castle guarded by an evil adventuring party and a company of hobgoblins. They made their way, at great cost, through the gate to find themselves in a long corridor. There were hobgoblin archers at the end of the corridor, and in the middle a knight dressed in all black, with a two-handed sword. The hobgoblins started firing on them, and the knight just stood there, ready to meet the player character's charge. Charge they did, and the rogue/ranger found himself in melee with the knight. They fought the knight for a few rounds, then realized he was an illusion. Upon realizing this, they ignored him and went after the hobgoblin. In the next room, after they dispatched the hobgoblins, they encountered the same illusionary knight. They attacked him, and after a couple rounds of fighting, determined that he was again an illusion. They then proceeded to ignore him and search the castle until finally they came upon the room where the adventuring group and a platoon of hobgoblins were hiding. The adventuring group in question was a cleric, an illusionist who had been responsible for all these illusory knights, and an evil fighter who was, in fact, the Knight of the Illusions, only this time he was real. The party saw this group and went rushing in, but the rogue/ranger, instead of attacking the knight, attempted to disbelieve. The knight struck him and killed him with a critical hit. I was playing a dragonborn fighter who had a bad temper, a lust for gold, and a business mindset. We were at the very beginning of the campaign, and at this point, everyone had met except one party member who was incorporated a little later on. He was a tabaxi artificer who was a bum and sold dirty boots. On night 1 of being in town, my character decides to go for a walk to the local luck temple. However, on the way there, the tabaxi was outside bumming around. He would sit outside someone's window, yowl until somebody threw an old pair of boots at him to get him to shut up, then he'd take the smelly boots and sell them. I just so happened to be walking by his setup when he dodged a pair of boots that hit me square in the head. I, in character, instantly saw red. I took it as a total insult that someone would ever throw a pair of boots at me. So I confronted him by getting into the tabaxi's face and shouting, pointing my claw at him. He at first asked for his boots back, then took a pass at mine. I refused both requests. His chillaxing, "ain't no big deal, I don't care" attitude didn't jive with me, so I took a swing at him, and due to a very bad roll, fell in the mud, getting my fine suit all dirty. So I got up to finish what I started, and due to a series of very bad rolls, I missed every punch I threw and ended up flat on my face in the mud without the guy ever laying a finger on me. He then proceeded to step onto my back, crouch by my ear, and whisper, "No one messes with my boots," before using one of his cantrips to turn the boots I was wearing hot pink, which the DM, in a bout of laughter, made permanent. I still have those boots now and have since gotten a matching hot pink fine suit, but that's a story for another day. Hail and well met, adventurer, and thank you for saving an attunement slot just for us, and of course for doing so to the very end of the video. If you've got a favorite D&D encounter, please share it in the comments section below. If you've got another story you'd like to share with us, please do so on our official subreddit, r/MrRipper, where we gather most of the stories that we share on this channel. If you're a DM or a player hoping to find a group, pop on over to Mr. Ripper's Group Finder Discord server. It would be so nice to see you on a Sunday Storytime stream soon. We have been starting to do more episodes with special guests, and I hope that this week that you pound a glass of water as soon as you wake up every day. Please, sub for Nat 20s, bing that bong so you can be part of the early squad. We love you here at Rip Daddy's house, and we're so glad you joined us today. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.